Good evening. I call to order the regular meeting of the Mayor and Board of Trustees of the Village of Burr Ridge for September 23, 2019. We have a particular good fortune tonight of having my grandson, Jack Grasso, lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Jack is 5 years old. He is in kindergarten at the Walker School. His mom, Krista's here, and his younger brother, Jordan. Jordan, raise your hand. That's Jordan. His grandfather, Bob, and his dad, Michael. So Jack plays everything, and he plays everything well. He's a baseball player. He's a soccer player. Last Saturday, he scored 2 goals for his team. He knows all the NFL helmets. He knows all the baseball major league teams. And he wants to grow up to be a veterinarian. You just show Jack a picture of an animal, and he knows them all. He wants to do the pledge tonight, and then he wants to leave and go home and watch the Bears win, right? So Jack, come on up and lead us in the pledge. Yeah. Right here, okay. That's novel. Okay. Face that. Go when you want to.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Francis.
Here.
Trustee Schiappa.
Here.
Trustee Baveza.
Here.
Trustee Snyder. Trustee McCall. Here. Trustee Model.
Here.
Mayor Grasso.
Here. Prior to the meeting, Trustee Snyder did let me know that he might not be able to make tonight's meeting. He's got some personal family things to attend to tonight. There are no presentations or public hearings tonight. That will take us to item 4, the consent agenda. All items listed with an asterisk are considered routine by the village board and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a board member or citizen so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda, discussed by the board, opened for public comment, and voted upon during this meeting. 5 minutes. A, approval of regular board meeting of August 26, 2019. B, receive and file pathway committee meeting of September 12, 2019. 6, ordinances. Ordinance amending section 10 of the subdivision ordinance of the Village of Burr Ridge regarding park impact fees and credit for private open spaces and recreation areas. B, ordinance amending Chapter 39, property maintenance of the Burr Ridge Municipal Code by adding new section 39.09. 8, considerations. F, approval of recommendation to approve union contract control officers. G, approval of recommendation by Chief Madden to hire a records clerk. H, receive and file personnel order for resignation of probationary patrol officer Justin Vandenberg. I, approval of recommendation to hire replacement patrol officer to fill vacancy created by resignation of Justin Vandenberg. J, acknowledge resignation of part-time general utility worker 1, Brian Bauer. K, approval of recommendation for Public Works Director to fill the vacancy of part-time general utility worker 1 created by the resignation of Brian Bauer. L, approval of recommendation to award a professional services contract for engineering services in the sanitary inflow infiltration control program to RJN Group, Inc. of Wheaton, Illinois, in the amount not to exceed $150,000. M, approval of recommendation to award contract for paver brick replacement and stairway reconstruction to Premier Landscape Contractors, Inc. of Lamont, Illinois, in the amount of $13,210. And approval of recommendation to award a contract for HVAC modifications at the Police Department building to Train Chicago of Willowbrook, Illinois, in the amount of $28,143. O, approval of proclamation designating October as Arts DuPage Month. P, approval of proclamation designating October as Fire Safety Month. Q, approval of request from Burr Ridge Park District for donation from Hotel Moto tax funds for the Park District's 2019 Harvest Fest event. R, approval of the vendor list dated September 9, 2019 in the amount of $178,063.77 for all funds plus $194,454.23 for payroll for a grand total of $372,518, which includes special expenditures of $27,859.41 for air testing services performed by GHD Services, Inc. And S, approval of vendor list dated September 23, 2019 in the amount of $575,727.58 for all funds, plus $199,321.15 for payroll, for a grand total of $775,048.73, which includes special expenditures of $39,656.66 to Kibit for marketing consulting services for May and June 2019, and $14,214.81 to Burns and McDonald regarding the County Line Road Sidewalk project. Can I have a motion, please, for the following items on the consent agenda? 5, A and B, 6, A and B, 8, F through S.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Trustee Model?
Yes.
Trustee Mitchell?
Yes.
Trustee Malaysia?
Yes.
Trustee Scampa?
Yes.
Trustee Francine?
Yes.
5-0.
5-0, the motion passes. That takes us to considerations. 8A, update regarding stereogenics in Willowbrook, Illinois. Doug?
Yes, there are a few updates from the last board meeting, all of which, or most of which, have been updated on our website. Let me find my notes here. So it's not new information as of today, but some new information. So as everyone, I believe, knows, the consent order was entered by the court on September 6th, which essentially lifted the seal order on the stereogenics facility in Willowbrook. It allows them to pursue their construction permit with the Illinois EPA. And then on Friday, September 20th, we learned at the end of the day that the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency had approved the construction permit. This, I believe, puts it into the purview of Willowbrooks to review it, building permit and zonings from the village of Willowbrook. There's also, as we noted, there's 2 bills that have been filed in Springfield. One would phase out the use of ethylene oxide. The other would allow home rule communities to prohibit the use of ethylene oxide sterilization operations within their communities. That legislation is limited to home rule communities. And the managers of Willowbrook, Darien, Hinsdale, myself, will be meeting again actually tomorrow to further discuss the option of the feasibility and option of condemnation of the properties in Willowbrook for a public purpose. And that is all the updates I have at this time. Thank you.
Right. Not surprising that the Illinois EPA steadfastly stayed with its position and did not follow what the residents of all these villages wanted, and that was not to allow a construction permit for stereogenics. We're going to continue to work on at least 3 fronts. Condemnation proceedings, we are still meeting and discussing the legal and the economic ramifications for that. We still are part of the lawsuit and that we were allowed to intervene in, so we are going to be considering our options for that. And number 1 on our list right now is to be very active down in Springfield during the veto session, which starts around the 23rd of October, 25th of October, and try to have a public presence down there to advocate for the entire banning of ETO in Illinois, which would, of course, then solve our problems. Does anybody else want to make a statement about this? Any observations? Anybody else from the board? Yes, Guy.
Well, like the rest of the trustees and the residents in the village, we're tremendously disappointed that the Illinois EPA has failed to protect us, that the Illinois Attorney General, Kwame Raoul, has failed us, and the DuPage County State's Attorney, Mr. Berlin, has failed us as well. Very disappointed. But most importantly, that this application by Sterigenics for this construction permit had failed to comply, in my opinion, with Matt Haller Act, as eloquently pointed out by many of the officials that spoke at the Illinois EPA Public Forum. Sterigenics never had to failed to prove that the medical devices they want to sterilize can only be sterilized by ethylene oxide. That proof was never given. The technology they wish to employ to continue to capture these emissions is unproven. And the air modeling that was demonstrating their efficiency and upgrades was modeled by Sterigenics. So the fox is in the hen house. Very disappointed. We'll continue to fight on these new legislative efforts that our legislators have submitted. And the residents, please don't give up. Please continue to fight. Please continue to send letters, emails, calls, whatever you can do to help the fight. Let them know we haven't given up. Let them know that we still want this facility closed down. We don't want it in our neighborhood. Thank you.
Yes, Doug?
There was one other thing I wanted to mention. I attempted to get a hold of Trustee Francis in his role as chairman of the EQC today, and I wasn't able to connect. But I believe it was at a meeting in April or May, the board authorized the hiring of a lobbyist, and we engaged that lobbyist through the end of the regular session of the General Assembly in May. I am recommending that we re-engage the lobbyist as previously approved by the board to represent us in the veto session. We did call and get a not-to-exceed number from the same lobbyist. It's $10,000 for a 6-week engagement, which is actually a better deal than the first time around. But I would just like your consensus that we continue with using that same lobbyist as previously approved.
Is anybody opposed to that?
Are we gonna all take a vote? I mean, I think we need to do what we can to keep Sterigenics out of our neighborhood, but it's very disappointing that the state does not feel the same way, but yes.
Yes, Al?
A big question I have, did this lobbyist do us any good? I mean, I'm not against the lobbyist. The question I have, did this one do us any good?
If you'll look at Mr. Walter, he's nodding his head up and down enthusiastically. Yes, we were told from a number of sources, I believe, that the lobbyist, our money was very well spent and was very helpful in getting the previous legislation, the Matt Haller Act, approved.
Well, then I'll make a motion to hire this lobbyist.
It's, so it's not on the agenda. It's within Doug's authority. Given the timing, I just was making sure we had consensus from the board, which I believe we do have. I don't hear any opposition. Is there any?
No objection.
Yeah. I think you've got your consensus, and there's no need to vote tonight on it. Okay. We will continue the fight. Thank you. Unless there's anybody else wants to comment from the audience on Sterigenics. Okay, that'll take us to 8B, discussion of home rule referendum for the village of Burr Ridge. I wanted to make a short statement about this and give the public some ideas about this subject. Under the Constitution of the State of Illinois, home rule municipalities have the power to self-govern and to regulate on any matter of local concern so long as the regulation is not preempted or prohibited by state law. Without home rule powers, the village of Burr Ridge possesses only those limited powers expressly granted by statute and powers necessarily implied from those explicit grants of power. For a variety of reasons, foremost among those being the recent issues with Sterigenics, I will be asking the village board to consider placing a referendum on the next available ballot for the voters of Burr Ridge to decide if they want to become a home rule community. Why consider home rule for Burr Ridge? A home rule local government in Illinois has additional powers to approve local regulations for the protection of the public health, safety, and welfare, and has additional licensing, zoning, and taxing authority. For Burr Ridge, that means local regulations that may prevent a Sterigenics or other businesses that may use ethylene oxide from locating in Burr Ridge. There is legislation pending in Springfield that would allow a home rule community to ban the use of ETO. Home rule for Burr Ridge would also allow the village to use its hotel motel tax dollars as we see fit. The state of Illinois requires that non-home rule villages such as Burr Ridge must use most of their hotel motel taxes for the promotion of tourism. In contrast, a home rule village may use hotel motel taxes not only for promotion of tourism, but also for local street improvements, police protection, or any other local governmental function. It is anticipated that revenue to Burr Ridge hotel motel taxes will reach $1 million in the coming years and should be used in the village for all purposes. What are the objections to home rule? There is the typical one, and that is residents fear that the village board would increase property taxes resulting from its authority as a home rule community. While it is true that a home rule community has additional authority to raise property taxes, there is significant evidence available that home rule communities are actually able to keep their property taxes lower because they have additional taxing flexibility, such as the hotel motel tax. In towns like Burr Ridge, even with home rule authority, the pressure from voters and residents not to raise taxes would be substantial. Residents may also be concerned about the additional regulatory authority granted by home rule. However, I would suggest that your mayor and trustees, locally elected and locally accountable, are in a better position to determine what is best for Burr Ridge than are the members of the Illinois General Assembly who come from all corners of the state and who, in my opinion, have done nothing but wreak havoc with our property taxes across the state. In order to become a home rule municipality, a referendum must be approved by a majority of those voting in Burr Ridge. With this in mind, I have asked the village administrator and the village attorney to begin researching the process of obtaining home rule powers and to prepare the necessary documents for consideration by the Board of Trustees at upcoming village board meetings. Anybody on the board want to say anything? Yes, sir.
If I remember right, we discussed this once before and it was brought up. And at that time, we had nowhere near the income that's coming from the hotel motel tax fund. And at that time, it was the board at that time just felt that it would be too easy to increase taxes by just three trustees voting on it, you could increase taxes. So it was decided not to put it on the, it was decided not to put it up for a vote.
I think you'd need four.
Or four, yeah, with the mayor.
You need, well, no, the mayor's not going to raise anybody's taxes, I can assure you that. But I don't see this board ever raising anybody's taxes either. But it will give flexibility. In any event, I think there should be a discussion of it. The board can decide whether or not to put it on as a referendum, and then the people can decide whether or not they want it. That's all. But put it in perspective of what's happened now with Sterigenics. Willowbrook did vote for and has home rule. And now the next step, as I understand it, for the construction permit is to now have Sterigenics go before the Willowbrook board, and the Willowbrook board can, in essence, block it by not, for example, approving the 87-foot high stack that will blow more air over to Burr Ridge area.
They need a zoning variation.
Yeah,
So
they
they
need
have
a-
to apply. They have 14 days from the issuance of the permit to apply for a zoning variation from the Village of Willowbrook. So that clock is ticking, and if they make such an application, they'd be required to hold one or more public hearings before their zoning board of appeals. So that'll give the public, once again, an opportunity to weigh in on that topic. So,
And there is a legitimate fear, of course, that a board would raise taxes, but the reality of a village of our size, where a few hundred votes can make the difference in an election, I don't think your trustees are going to run off and raise your property taxes. And, oh, by the way, it raises their property taxes too. So look at the big picture. I'm sure some people will start pounding and saying property taxes are too high. The Village of Burr Ridge has nothing to do with your property taxes, and will not increase your property taxes, despite what some people say from time to time. And so this is something, though, that would give the board flexibility to protect the village residents better in terms of public health and safety, and also use the tax dollars that are just sometimes too thin for us, especially the hotel motel tax, for other purposes other than tourism. We could use it for improving the streets, towards our police pension and our police departments, and anything else. So it's something for the residents of this village, I think, to consider. We'll bring it up at the next couple of board meetings to give the board time to discuss it, and we'll go from there. Anybody have anything to say?
Yes, thank you. I have a few questions first and then some comments. So, Doug, what happened to the bill in Springfield last year that was going to address the hotel motel tax fund? Did that pass? Did that?
There was legislation that was approved that for a limited period of time, it sunsets in 2023, I believe, allows non-home rule communities to use only 25% of their hotel taxes for capital and economic development.
But that
Still,
did pass and was signed into law.
That did pass and was signed into law.
So we've already had some relief on that
We've
front.
had some relief, but again, it was only 25%, and it wasn't for anything. It was still limited to capital and economic development. So we couldn't use it for police, for example.
But
either.
capital, that's quite a
It's a
wide variety of
significant,
uses.
it's
Yeah.
a significant improvement, and I'm very pleased that we got that.
So am I. And how does federal law play into home rule communities? As the mayor explained, unless state law still applies and federal law would still apply, right? So it's not just we can do whatever we want. There are still rules and guidelines, correct?
Certainly, maybe Attorney Durkin can address that better than I can, but obviously our powers are still limited by the Constitution of the United States and the state of Illinois.
the other limitation is that the legislature has the right to preempt home rule communities by tacking on to legislation language that preempts home rule powers in a supermajority vote, but they can do so, and they frequently do so, especially in the areas of collective bargaining statutes, things of that nature. They're not shy about using that preemption power. So it's not a blank authority given to, or carte blanche given to the municipalities. The state still has their ability to limit the use of home rule powers. Many home rule communities chafe under that limitation because in certain areas you don't want to be preempted in terms of regulatory matters, but we are. So
is it right to say that as frustrating as it is, part of the issue with stereogenics is that they are under current law following the law, so what could you do, right? I mean, Willowbrook hasn't been able to close them yet. And how would we be able to impact a facility in Willowbrook, even if we're home rule? Are we going to be able to send in the police and shut them down, or what? How is that going to help us?
No, of course we can't do that. The point is that stereogenics does have the power, that Willowbrook does have the power now as a home rule community to stop them from getting the 87-foot tall stack that they want. They have much more power to regulate stereogenics and the use of ETO. So they're in a
and
much
you pointed
better-
out there's a bill pending in Springfield. One of the two bills pending is limited to home rule municipalities being able to ban the use of ETO. So if you're not a home rule community and that bill does pass, you're out of luck, so.
Right, but the other bill would ban it entirely, I believe, that's out of the second bill, and I think, yeah, so hopefully our lobbyists will focus on that second bill right now. But, so thank you for answering my questions. My comments are, I have concerns about it. I recognize that there is a great desire among the staff and the public to do something about stereogenics, and I share that desire. I don't think this is the solution for us anyway, and I think it opens up another can of worms in terms of, as the mayor pointed out, it's not just property taxes. There are other types of taxes. For example, Mayor, the place of eating tax and the sales tax that you've spoken out in favor of in the past. So there is an opportunity to raise all kinds of other taxes and fees. And it also relieves other opportunities for regulation from Springfield, for example, for corruption or self-dealing or all sorts of other things. So I think when you take the home rule situation off, you're putting an awful lot of trust in a very few amount of people, and there is opportunity for all sorts of self-dealing and corruption, tax increases, and other problems. And while
You know
all
what,
of us might
that's
be great-
nonsense to think that
Thank
a
you, Mr.
home rule community is somehow more subject to your standard of corruption and anything else. We can raise the sales tax within our authority as a non-home rule community. You are a fear-mongering person, and you're starting already.
You're attacking me personally. These ad hominem attacks are ridiculous. I'm speaking about the issue, and I think it speaks to you that you would just come out and attack me personally. I think I question your motives even more now that I saw that.
I don't like you, that's why.
Well, I don't like you either, but that is not why we're talking about
Right.
this. We're talking about an issue that I think is of concern to the public, and I think that we should have. a
I
healthy
think you're
discussion about the pros and
fear-mongering.
cons.
Get the statistics, then we'll discuss it.
I'm looking forward to learning more from the
Right.
staff.
Well, that's a better statement than what you just made.
I think my statement stands.
Yeah, I'm sure it does for you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Well, I'm open to learning more about the home rule. I think it will help unlock some of those funds from the hotel motel tax funds, which we know we can use when we're dealing with the police pension. For police salaries, maybe we'll be able to put some more full-time people at the police station, maybe another full-time person at Public Works. We seem to be filling those part-time positions pretty often. And it's something that, that we could use. I mean, we are all responsible executives up here, where we're going to maintain conservative fiscal management. We have a budget process that we go through, that we invite the public to, where we have our finances opened. We are going to review an audit later on. Well, third party audited all of our financials. We're in a good financial state, but I think, in this time where everyone's looking for dollars to pay for our expenses, this is one way to do it. Another way, I'm on the Economic Development Committee, looking for businesses to move here, and I think this is something that can help the village itself.
Yes, Guy.
Yes, I agree with Trustee Scappa. I'd like to learn more about this. I would suggest a workshop or two conducted by staff, bringing all the facts to us, pros and cons, successes and failures, and also how Willowbrook managed the process of becoming home rule, how they educated their residents on home rule, and what benefit, other than they're able to have more say in what Stereogenics says it does in their community, what other benefits would be for this community besides this?
Would you be in favor of maybe a special meeting so that we could just
Something.
have an informal
Yeah.
workshop
Yeah.
to do something like that?
Conducting it at a board level during a regular board meeting, it's not conducive. We need a special session, workshop or special board meeting to focus on it.
Yep. Al?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. When we talked about it before, we just sort of cruised it a little bit, and one of the reasons was the easy ability to raise taxes, but we didn't go into it very deeply. It was decided we didn't need it at the time, so we'll go away with, we wouldn't work on it. But I like the idea of a workshop, even, what are the pros and cons of home rule? There are a lot of cities and villages that are home rule in the state.
Far more
So
than
I
that.
will look for a date that works for everybody's schedule. We'll have a workshop right here, have an open meeting if anybody from the public wants to attend. So, yes.
I'm open to learning more about it. It's changing time, so we have to change with that. But I think a workshop would be very well for that purpose, and just learning the pros and cons and other examples of other villages and how, the changes benefited them.
I agree with you. Anybody else want to make a comment on this subject before we go on? Okay. That'll take us to 8C, presentation of fiscal year 2018-19 audit.
Yes, I'd like to introduce Finance Director Jerry Sapp, who will lead the discussion, presentation on this topic.
Good evening. Part of the oversight responsibility of the village board is to annually contract and independent auditing firm to review the financial operations of the village. The auditor is independent from the staff and reports directly to the Board of Trustees. The Finance Department facilitates the audit process and manages the process from start to finish, and the process is managed from start to finish by the Assistant Finance Director. I'd like to introduce Amy Nelson, the Assistant Finance Director. You want to stand? Yeah. Amy was actually the Assistant Finance Director back in 2008. She's been out in the public sector for the last 10 years, private sector for the last 10 years. Amy stepped in after we lost the previous Assistant Director back in April, and she jumped right in, kind of a baptism by fire here, and kept the audit process moving forward and on schedule. We're very happy to have her back as part of the Burridge team. Also tonight, I want to introduce Scott Termaine, a partner with the audit firm of BKD. He will provide a brief overview of the audit process and the auditor's opinion. Scott.
Thanks, Jerry. Thanks, Mayor, and thanks to the entire board for engaging us again to conduct the audit this year. Appreciate all of Jerry and Amy and actually the entire finance team's efforts in preparing for the audit. Everything was in really good order for us. As normal, we were on site during July to conduct our audit, and all the advanced preparation certainly goes a long way to ensuring for a smooth process there. So appreciate that. As in the past, we are providing two main deliverables as part of the audit. The first is the audited financial statements, which would be the thicker of the two documents if you're following with a hard copy. And then our required communication to you all as the board that summarizes the results of our audits for you. That's, again, a required communication under auditing standards to you, just so you have familiarity with the process. I'll briefly cover the financial statements for you first. And as always, if you've not already done so, I would encourage you to take a look at the management discussion and analysis, which is on pages 4 through 13 of the document. If you can only get through a few pages, those are certainly the ones to focus on, as they provide sort of a nice comparative and summarized overview of the financial statements, along with some narratives on some of the key changes that occurred during the year. If you open up the financial statement report, just after the table of contents and the list of village officials, you'll find our audit opinion. I'll quickly highlight here, just as a reminder, the second paragraph of that opinion includes a paragraph on management's responsibility. And this just tells the reader that management has the ultimate responsibility for the financial statements and the fair presentation of those under generally accepted accounting principles. Our responsibility as your auditors then is to provide an opinion on the financial statements, and for 2019, that is, again, what we refer to as a clean or unmodified opinion on the financial statements, which is exactly what you want. It's the best form of opinion that you can receive on the financial statements. I will highlight that on the second page of the opinion, we do include what we refer to as an emphasis of matter paragraph, where we note one significant change that took effect for 2019, and that is the adoption of GASB Statement 75. Which relates to the village's other post-employment benefits liability, or OPEB, we'll call it for short. This is an important change for you, so I'll just take a couple minutes to touch on that and the effect that it has. So what does that mean ultimately to the village is that, I know many of you may recall, I've talked about this standard was going to be coming for the last couple of years, and you've probably anxiously been waiting for this update. So here we are. Ultimately, what we're talking about here is the village's obligation to provide benefits, particularly insurance after retirement from employees. The new accounting is very similar to the changes that you saw take effect with the pension liabilities back in fiscal year 2016. So in 2019, this change in standards brought that full OPEB liability onto the books for the first time. So if we focus and look back to April 30th, 2018, the existing liability that you had there of approximately $700,000 was increased as of May 1 with that adoption to about $3.1 million under this new standard. So that larger liability ultimately reduces the village's overall financial health, which we refer to as your net position. And that brought that down again as of the beginning of this fiscal year, May 1, 2018, by right about $2.5 million from what was originally reported. Then as you proceeded through fiscal year 2019, that liability ultimately increased by about $200,000 to roughly $3.3 million at the end of 4/30/2019. So as you look at the financial statements, the statement of net position is on pages 14 to 15. The village's largest liabilities do relate to the IMRF and police pension plans, where there's a combined liability of about $14.2 million, and that's up from about $12.7 in the prior year. Like most governments, pensions are the village's largest liability, so you're not unique in that regard. Certainly everyone's heard of all the struggles that governments and municipalities are dealing with when it comes to pension funding. So the overall net position for the village that you'll see on pages 14 to 15 is just under $300 million. However, because most of that is actually invested in capital assets or otherwise restricted, and you talked during the home rule discussion that those taxes are certainly restricted, those fall into that bucket. The remainder that actually falls under your discretion for spending at your essentially own will and determination has been reduced to a negative position because of those large pension liabilities and the OPEB liability. And again, that's not unique to Burr Ridge. It's common for municipalities to be experiencing that. So with all that seemingly bad news, I do want to point out that if you look at page 18 in the report, the village's general fund is still maintaining a very healthy fund balance of about $5.3 million. And that's about 61% of what the annual expenses are for the fund. And just to give you some context there as a best practice, the Government Finance Officers Association will suggest that you should never go below about 2 months' worth, which equates to about 16%. So at 61%, you're certainly well above that ratio. So a very good position there. So that's all I'll touch on for the financial statements. The other document that I alluded to in addition to the financial statements is that required communication under auditing standards that provides a summary of our responsibilities under generally accepted auditing standards, lets you know that we didn't encounter any difficulties as we conducted the audit or have any disagreements with management, nothing of that sort. Additionally, we did not find any internal control deficiencies that we're reporting to you as part of the engagement. This letter does note to you some additional new GASB standards as GASB continues to issue new statements. So there are several new standards that will be impacting the village over the next few years. I won't go into those in more detail here after all the OPEB talk, but if anyone has any questions with either the financial statements or that required communication, I'm happy to address those.
First from the board, anybody from the board?
So the liability with the pensions included in it, that's a bit concerning to me. I think it speaks even more to concern of a home rule community being able to raise taxes to cover the pension obligation. I would be concerned about that. That's more of a comment. My question for you is how, in terms of the general, I see like the hotel motel tax fund and the general revenue funds and stuff, and you say that's up to management's responsibility. So you're not auditing that are we collecting all the revenue we should be collecting? You're not looking, you don't get into that level of detail.
We are. Just the opinion points out that ultimate responsibility for the accuracy of the financial statements rests with management, and our responsibility is to come and take a look at those. So we do perform tests.
Like the place of eating tax, you would you would do some tests in some restaurants and make sure that we're collecting?
We don't go to the restaurant, so that's administered through state like other sales taxes.
We've
But
had issues in the past where people are underreporting their sales and not properly paying their taxes, and the village loses out on revenue. So we're talking about capturing all the revenue possible. It's important that we're capturing all that revenue, but you wouldn't get into that level.
Yeah, that would, you can do other specific tax audits to address those types of concerns. What we will ultimately look at is the piece that comes in from the state, remitting that share of those taxes back to you is accurate based on.
So as a trustee, how would I push to get audits of those things? Because again, I'm aware we've had problems in the past where over $1 billion of revenue wasn't reported in some instances, and we lost out significant revenue in the past.
So that would ultimately be a board and management discussion in terms of moving forward with an engagement like that. That would be at your discretion.
I'll bring that up with my colleagues in the future. Thank you.
Anyone else?
So I know under state statute, the amount that had to be stated in our financials for the insurance for benefits to employees went from 200,000 to 31 million.
It was about $700,000 under the old standards and increased at the beginning of the year to about 3.1 million.
3.1 million. And was that done actuarially? I mean, how?
Yeah, it's a couple of components. So actuarially, the liability is identified. I can sort of share an analogy here in terms of the way the old reporting handled those liabilities is, if you think about your mortgage, you have, let's say you have a $300,000 mortgage on your house. You get a monthly bill that tells you what to pay. Under the pre-existing, I should say, standards, if you made that required contribution, the equivalent of your mortgage payment, there was no liability recognized on the book. So it essentially disregarded that $300,000 mortgage. Under the current standards now, that liability does come onto the books. So we are recognizing the fact that that larger liability is out there, as opposed to just that difference in funding that you may have encountered during the years.
And this is just for the insurance benefit?
Correct.
It has nothing to do with the pension obligation?
Although the same accounting standards essentially apply there, there's a different statement, but the equivalent treatment is there.
But we've seen pension.
Yes.
Pension being recognized on their statements.
Yes.
This is something new.
Right.
Okay.
So that change came about for pensions back in the 2016 timeframe, and this one is just taking effect now.
Anyone else?
Are any of those liabilities likely to go down in the future?
Well, so it's two components. A certain actuarial impact has a result on that. Investment performance has an impact on it. And then the other component is the village's funding.
The payments. Thank you.
And you can pay it down.
Yep.
So in that regard, you'll notice that there is a healthy reserve. So I've been meeting with Gary and with Ray Lucas from the Police Pension Board, and we've been kicking the tires on some concepts of trying to pay down some of the liability, obviously with your authority. And so I am intending to bring you some options that you might consider that might lessen those balloon payments and things that are obligated to be paid by all villages in the future. And within that, giving you some more options too on why home rule could be used, hotel motel tax in particular. So we have a couple of dynamics going on. We have a healthy reserve. We also have, I think back when I was last mayor, we had $800,000 put aside when we stopped the contract, when we ended the contract for the bridge on 72nd Street. I think that money, I went and asked Jerry, I think that money's still sitting there also. So I think we have some healthy options that maybe we should consider as a board now, rather than for future boards to face, 10 years or so from now. So, again, there'll be options for you guys to consider, and I'm going to be putting them together in a package for you. Okay, any more good news about the audit? So in summary, we, like all villages, we have the liability of pensions and that every village, municipality in the state has. But overall, all the accounting has been proper, you've gotten good cooperation, and everything else looks to be in order.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I just have one last question. What has been the investment return? Because right now it must be pretty healthy, and I mean, what happens if it goes down?
Yeah, so it does vary. You have a few different plans there. IMRF is administered by the state, the police pension fund. There are disclosures around the investment income. I mean, to give you some context there, if you look on page 70 of the financial statements, it presents the what's referred to as the annual money-weighted rate of return for the police pension fund as a whole for 2019. That was about 6%.
Which is a good,
Yeah,
good return.
Yep. And as I said, that certainly does then drive ultimately what that actuarial report does look like, then, because that just increases the value of the assets that offset the liability.
Much better than 26%.
Yeah, even
right.
if you
We've got
look how much the
some
liability goes up,
Yes, yeah,
we're not making our way out.
thank you.
Anyone else? Are there any questions from anybody in the audience about the audit? Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you all.
All right, that takes us to 8B, consideration of associate membership in the West Central Municipal Conference. Doug?
Yes, I have discussed this with Mayor Grasso, and we are recommending that the village join the West Central Municipal Conference. This is a council of governments comparable to the DuPage Mayors and Managers Conference. We've been involved with DuPage Mayors and Managers for a long time. We see a lot of benefit from that involvement. I'm on a committee, or several committees, Evan's on some committees, Mayor Grasso's involved, but that focuses just on DuPage County. That is a DuPage County Council of Governments, and what I'm suggesting is that we join West Central Municipal Conference, which is Western Cook County. You see in the attachment all the different villages and cities that are involved with West Central. Some of those close by include Willowbrook, Bensonville, Bloomingdale, Elmhurst, Oakbrook Terrace, Villa Park. Not all right on the border of Cook and DuPage, but most of them are. I think that there's, for a small fee of $5,500 per year for a membership, there are benefits in terms of better networking with our Cook County neighbors, in terms of additional staff training opportunities, lobbying. They have a very robust lobbying effort in Springfield as well as in Washington, and potential cost sharing, information sharing. They have a lot of surveys of other, how do they do it in West Cook when you talk about different decisions that you make. They have surveys to that effect, and of course, additional staff training opportunities are out there. So with that, I would again recommend that the board direct staff to proceed with membership in the West Central Municipal Conference.
Two comments on that. I was interested that Willowbrook, and I did speak to Mayor Trilla, Willowbrook is all of DuPage County, and he spoke very highly of his village's participation and ability to network, ability to do some things with the, in conjunction with Cook County. So that was one of the reasons I was interested in it. I did run some of these ideas by Trustee Snyder when I realized he wasn't going to be here. And to my understanding in speaking with Trustee Snyder that he sees the benefit in it too. But I'm sure if he was here, he'd support it. But anybody have any questions? I suppose we need a motion then to join.
I'll make the motion, we join.
Second?
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Trustee Pavesa?
Yes.
Trustee Francis?
Yes.
Trustee Scapa?
Yes.
Trustee McCall?
Yes.
Trustee Arnold?
Yes.
5-0.
5-0, the motion passes. 8E, presentation of community engagement plan for village review of Illinois cannabis regulation and Tax Act.
At a couple of previous board meetings, we've had this topic on the agenda. At the last meeting, I believe it was the last meeting in August, the board directed the Plan Commission and the Economic Development Committee to begin review and to provide ultimately recommendations to the village board, economic development on the economic aspects of opting in for allowing retail cannabis in the village or opting out. Plan Commission, what would the zoning regulations be? Where would they be allowed to be located if we did allow cannabis businesses? And what types of restrictions would be placed on them if we did allow them? In talking at the staff level about this, we feel very strongly that a community engagement plan, this is a very important issue. We've watched our neighbors and other villages begin or go through this process, and making sure that the community is aware and is involved is a critical aspect of this decision-making process, because it is a brand-new deal in the state of Illinois. So we put together that plan that was included in your attachment. There's a lot of background there in the plan, but in effect, we will dedicate a page on the website with a link prominently displayed on the homepage with all information about this ongoing discussion, including notifications of public meetings, staff reports, a copy of the state legislation, frequently asked questions, reports, and any relevant news items. We'll do press releases as determined appropriate. We'll post notices of all public meetings and hearings on the village calendar, website, social media. We'll use social media for more than just notices of meetings. We'll inform, provide other information on social media. And we'll focus on informing all of village staff and community leaders, yourself and EDC and Plan Commission, of information regarding how to talk, make sure they're aware of it, so that when they have constituents asking them about it, they can respond in an educated manner. And again, the whole purpose is to get the community involved in this decision, whether to opt out or opt in to cannabis businesses, and if opting in, what regulations would be appropriate. Be happy to answer any questions. Janet Kowal put this together, so I want to give Janet full credit for putting this together with Evan's help and my input. And again, if you have any questions or any suggestions, we'd be glad to hear that.
Anyone?
Mayor Russ, I'm curious what your opinion is on the issue. You've spoken in favor of taxes and broad tax bases and stuff. Are you in favor or against this?
I didn't speak in favor of taxes. Stop grandstanding, trustee. I'll let you know my opinion on it as we discuss it. What's your opinion on it?
I'm curious to learn more. I don't know
I'm
enough
sure
about
you
it.
are.
I've spoken in favor of broad-based tax solutions and looking for new revenue sources, so I'm
That's
curious to
good.
learn
That's
more.
good to know. That's not this subject. This is about the cannabis regulations. You want to put your position
I think a
forward?
big part of it is the taxes. So
Given
I'm
your
curious.
history, do you want to put your position?
I'm sorry?
Do you want to put your position forward on this?
I'm asking more. I was curious. Nothing gets done without your approval, Gary, so we want.
Nothing gets done without the approval
That's my
of
opinion.
this board,
It's good for you.
okay?
Just interested in learning more about it, and hearing what the Economic Development Committee comes back with and on the commission. So look forward to the public being involved
Yep,
and learning more about it.
that would be the way to do it.
Just add, for the public and for the trustees, the point people on this are Evan and myself, so, if you get a question, you need to direct it to one of us, you can start with Evan or myself, and we'll take care of it.
Anyone else? Okay. Yes, come on up. You can come up and introduce yourself and
Name's John. Oh, thank you. My name is John, longtime resident of Burridge. Just was curious about when we can expect the timeline for that economic commission to come back for the decision, to help you guys with your decision. When do you think they'll act?
The the Planning Commission will have a public hearing on Monday, October 7th. The Village Board, the Economic Development Commission meets on Wednesday, October 9th. We hope, or I should say hope, but typically they make a recommendation the same night they review something. They could decide they need more time, either body, which would delay it, but if they both conclude their discussion at those October dates, then it would be back before the board likely on October 14th.
Okay, thank you. We're just curious because we're exploring other communities, just like for Ridge. Excuse me, we're residents here, so we'd like to see if we can start something here, but time's of the essence. The application comes out October 1st. They're due January 1st. If we don't find out in Burr Ridge until November, December, Burr Ridge is probably out. So,
Well, the schedule is tight and it was imposed by the legislature. Unfortunately, that's its decision, but I think we have to give it a fair hearing. I've already gotten emails of people who want it, and I've gotten emails from people who don't want it. So it's a big change. It's a big societal change. So I think, despite the schedule, I think we have to air it out and give it the time.
are there any particular issues that have been brought up to you that you think we should try to start addressing now?
Well, there's the moral and issue. Okay, people either don't want it. Period. There's the question about, is this going to increase crime in some way? There's the economic benefit of it. Will it, in fact, bring revenue in? Will it bring the type of business in? There's the zoning aspects of it. Do we want it in commercial areas or industrial areas? Do we want it in the village center in County Line Square? So I've only brought up 4 or 5.
Yeah.
There's a lot more.
Okay, just curious. Thank you. Appreciate
Yep.
your time.
Anyone else? Okay, that takes us to item 9, public comment. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address the board on any topic for up to 5 minutes? Yes, Rich?
I didn't get to sign in, Mr. Mayor.
We don't have that requirement.
Thank you. Good evening, Richard Morton, Lake Ridge Club, Mr. Mayor, trustees. Friday was a good day for us. The Illinois EPA issued the construction permit to the menace known as Sterigenics. And in my opinion, John Kim, the director of Illinois EPA who oversaw that, has become public enemy number 1. Constitution of Illinois makes great pains to point out that it's every citizen's right to breathe clean air, have a clean environment. And I don't think that the Illinois EPA and John Kim embrace that. And I can paraphrase a few things in history. In 1984, in a letter to Griffith Laboratories, IEPA wrote, the toxicity data provides evidence of human cancers, the pancreas, bladder, brain, central nervous system, et cetera, yet IEPA did nothing. Later in 1989, in a letter to Cy Levine, a concerned citizen pointed out the dangers of ethylene oxide to a mostly ignorant Illinois EPA, and again, nothing happened. This past April, a PhD chemist with 45 years of experience with chromatography and mass spectrometry looked at the back then testing that was done at Sterigenics and took it apart as being not even effective at the ridiculously high levels that they were touting as a no detect. And again, nothing happened. May 7, 2019, IEPA Director Kim spoke to the Chemical Industry Council of Illinois, yet IEPA has no information what was said, who said what, who he met with, other than the general comments that he met with them. They don't even have a transcript of that. And in September, we know that John Kim's IEPA approved the construction permit. One that I might point out was roundly criticized by hundreds of people from the community. Hundreds of comments were made about it. There were omissions in that permit, and yet IEPA approved it. And in my opinion, Director John Kim must go. And I think that everybody in this room, anybody that hears my voice, ought to contact Governor J.B. Pritzker and demand John Kim's resignation. You can reach Pritzker's office at 217-782-6830, or you can email him at governor's office at illinois.gov. I have one other comment. I heard a few comments that they weren't entirely clear about HB 3885 and HB 3888. And the importance of home rule with 3885 is that it allows villages to enact a total ban on ethylene oxide sterilizers in their community. 3888 does nothing of the sort, and all it does is ban emissions. So the difference being with 3885, you could still have 55-gallon drums of ethylene oxide, with 3885, it would prevent the transportation of ethylene oxide in and out of your community, where 3888 is the only bill that's passed. You still have the risk represented by ethylene oxide coming into your community in large quantities. And as I previously told this body, there's a substantial risk if there's ever an accident, an overturned, punctured drum, either a large-scale explosion and or large-scale evacuations, depending on the quantity. So there's a significant difference between the two bills, and home rule could put Burridge in a position to be safer than just 3888 alone. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Rich. Is there any other public comment? Okay, item 10, reports and communications from village officials and board members. Anyone, yes?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I have, as I mentioned, it's in the spirit of the audit, I would like to bring up the issue of making sure that we're collecting all the revenue that we're due. I don't know when the last time the village audited the hotel motel tax fund receipts or the place of eating tax receipts, but I am aware that there were problems in the past with places underreporting or unreporting their receipts and their sales, cheating the village out of tax revenue. So not knowing the answer to it, I would call on all of us to A, find out the answer when it was last audited, and B, call on my colleagues to ask for audits. If not spot audits, there's not that many places of eating and hotel motels. We need to make sure we're collecting the revenue they're due. In the instance I was aware of, it was a underreporting of an estimated amount of $1.5 million that resulted in a $15,000 payment from one particular business. And I think that given that, we should certainly start with that business and maybe look at some other ones as well to make sure we're collecting all the revenue we're due given the deficits and the need for revenue in the village.
Anyone else?
How was the underreporting found?
Maybe Doug can answer that. I wasn't there at the time. I wasn't in office at the time. So I think it came up during a liquor license hearing, actually.
I was probably community development director at the time, and I'm not familiar with that situation.
Well, I think we'll look into it and find out what the real facts are.
The state does those audits.
Well, this
Yeah, I'm
came
not
up
quite
in the
sure
village.
exactly how it's done. I know that we don't always get the report. I think it's a generalized report because we've always questioned whether or not we've gotten our community tax percentage fairly and accurately. But we should know. We should look into it.
Yeah, just
Yes.
to be clear, is the only, and I'm looking at Jerry to correct me if I say something wrong here, but the only tax of that nature that we collect directly is the places of eating tax.
The self-reported taxes are hotel, motel.
Terry, could you come up for a second?
Sorry. Self-reported taxes are the hotel motel taxes and the places of eating taxes. And, finance, we collect and monitor those taxes. And, we can reach out to businesses and, also do an internal audit of that. We have done that in the past and do a hotel motel audit and, check out the occupancy and, kind of do some analytics on the collections. And,
How'd you find the last one, the one I'm referring to?
the places of eating tax.
The underreporting of $1.5 million in revenue, shorting the village of estimated 15,000. That was an estimate, I believe.
That, I don't believe we have done that one. We've done a couple of hotel motel. It might have been
I saw
done.
the checks that the restaurateur wrote, and I saw the compromise that was reached with the village.
Yeah, I can
There's
check into that,
documents.
but it might have been something with the Illinois Department of Revenue also.
Well, if they're cheating the state, they're definitely cheating us, but in terms of the self-reporting in the village, I think that one we really should get on top of. Because if one place could cheat us out of an estimate of $15,000, I mean, it could really add up, as we talked about the money in the hotel motel tax fund. It's not insignificant, right?
Well, let's find out what the facts are, rather than the accusation.
I think you represented the client, Gary, you should know.
We'll do that.
Anyone else?
I would just also ask that you please keep the personal attacks out of it, Gary. I'm here to do a good job, and I told you I would work with you when you're right, and when you're wrong, I'll hold you accountable. So if you don't like me, I don't care. I'm going to keep speaking and doing a good job.
Well, make sure you attend the meetings then. I think this is the first one in about 4.
I was sick last meeting. I had a
Yeah,
high fever.
right,
If
you
you'd like
supposedly
me, I
were on
called in.
vacation,
I wasn't absent,
and-
Gary.
and you weren't on
I was
vacation.
not absent.
Yeah. So, any other reports and communication from village officials? I have a few. Here's one. Zach, since you questioned my removing you from the EDC, I went back and looked at your attendance record. And you can check it yourself, but you missed 42% of the meetings. So I don't know how missing 42% of the meetings makes you a good board member. Now, Hurricane Dorian devastated the Bahamas, and Burr Ridge resident Dr. Kaleem Malik was the medical lead of a team of volunteers with relief organization Humanity First. Dr. Malik has served as the chair of emergency medicine at St. Anthony Hospital and works with DuPage Medical Group. He has worked in various disasters over the last 17 years and trained other doctors for disaster work. Dr. Malik spent 12 days in the Bahamas and is now preparing for another relief trip, now in Guatemala. Dr. Malik and his family have been Burr Ridge residents since 2005, and so I think we should recognize his great efforts. Also, on another good note, a new business is about to open in Burr Ridge. The Bel Canto Music Academy will be located at 92 Burr Ridge Parkway. They will offer lessons in voice, singing, and a variety of instruments. Their grand opening is scheduled for Wednesday, October 25th from 5 to 7 and is open to the public. Also, Burr Ridge Park District hosts its annual Harvest Fest this coming Saturday, September 28th at Harvester Park from 1 to 5 p.m. A family-friendly event with a variety of activities including hay rides, a petting zoo, and refreshments. See the Park District's website for full details. One more announcement. Pleasantdale Park District hosts its annual Fall Festival at Walker Park on Saturday, October 12th, starting at 3:30 p.m. Games, bounce house, and custom parade at 5 p.m. and a bonfire with s'mores and are all part of the fun. Again, check their website. Oh, and one more thing. I had breakfast at Porterhouse. So Porterhouse is now open for breakfast. I recommend it. It was a very nice breakfast.
I'll second that.
And they're trying to build up their business in Burr Ridge. So if you get hungry for breakfast any morning, you might want to try Porterhouse. And of course, all of our other restaurants in Burr Ridge that serve breakfast. So with that, unless there's any other announcements?
Yes, I have one more,
Yes.
Mr. Mayor. So I'm curious, again, if we're going to meet all of your family at these pledges. You know, I've noticed that you're having your family come and do the pledge, and I think it's very emblematic of your self-dealing attitude. If it benefits you and your family, you'll have it here. We used to have children from the community come and give the pledge, but I've seen your wife, your grandson, your child. I can't wait to meet your whole family, Gary. Thank you.
You are a petty person. Can we get a motion
I make a motion, we adjourn.
that we adjourn till October 7th at 7 PM?
Second.
Thank you. And all in favor? Aye. We're adjourned.